and bipolar disorder when we talk about how it affects individuals. It affects a person's ability to think, behave, how they feel, and they may seem to have lost touch with reality. And that's the thing, like I said, that many people are really uncertain about and don't know how to manage or how to understand where someone is if they're dealing with this condition. So it causes significant distress with family, with friends, because there's this misunderstanding of how to communicate sometimes with the person. So it's basically something that's oftentimes diagnosed in late teen years through the 20s. And one thing that helps, though, is that we know there are treatments called like first episode treatments for individuals that have schizophrenia. One thing we know about schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, anxiety, major depressive disorder, any condition, the earlier intervention, the better. And actually, if you intervene after the first episode, especially with schizophrenia, you're more likely to have a better outcome. So one thing that they try to do is they try to get the person into a program where they're getting, whether it be talk therapies, medications, like I said, the atypical antipsychotic medications, second generation antipsychotics medications, to stabilize them, and then work with that individual so that hopefully they don't have another episode again. One thing we know about schizophrenia is that it is progressive, that it will worsen over time if it isn't treated. That's why we sometimes see individuals, and sometimes we might see them in our communities, or it might be a family member. If they haven't received the proper treatment, then it likely will get worse. And that's why it's so important that we try to help individuals that might be struggling. So to talk a little bit more about psychosis and psychotic symptoms, I talked about that earlier with bipolar disorder. That can be with bipolar disorder type 1 with psychotic features, but schizophrenia is known by its psychotic features, by psychosis. And that's really about, whether it be abnormal thinking, behaviors, changes in perceptual experiences. So it might be, for instance, the person's change in how they hear things, or they might smell things or see things that aren't there, like hallucinations, even feel things. So it's all sensory in nature. And when that happens, like I said, it's very distressing to the individual, especially if it's never happened before. And you might wonder, well, what can we do about that? Well, that's where medication comes in. And there are certain medications that have been proven to be effective in mitigating some of these symptoms. Another thing about psychosis is that there's something called delusions. And we know that with delusions, there are things like the person is basically feeling like they are something that they're not. They are maybe someone that they're not. And they might say, for instance, associate it with, say, being paranoid, feeling like they're being watched, or they may feel that they are, for instance, in a situation where they are whether it be superhuman or have special powers that others don't have. And that's not uncommon for people that experience delusions. And they can also be distressing for people, but we know that if addressed, like I said, they can be very much maintained. There's also irrational fears that come about with delusions. They might feel that, for instance, there are others, like I said, out to get them, that paranoia, and also the idea that they might be getting messages through the television, radio, or even now the internet. And that's another thing that can happen to someone. It's a thought disorder, and so it also might include unusual thinking, or what we call disorganized speech. So when a person has schizophrenia, you might say things that don't make sense. There's different things like it's called like word salad. And so word salad is a type of schizophrenia symptom where the person is speaking.